So in the past couple days, there was some news that came out from Duke Tobin, the director of personnel of the Cincinnati Bengals, and he spoke with reporter Kelsey Conway, and she asked him about the chances of being able to keep Ja'Marr Chase and Tee Higgins, and he gave a very honest answer. And of course, going into this offseason, that's one of the biggest questions. Are the Bengals going to be able to keep Ja'Marr Chase and Tee Higgins around with Joe Burrow? Tee Higgins wasn't able to get a deal done last offseason. He gets franchise tagged. Ja'Marr Chase had his fifth-year option exercised in the past year, and so he technically would be playing under that in 2025, but it's expected that Ja'Marr is going to get a contract. So it's a very complicated situation, but here's what Tobin said with Kelsey Conway of Cincinnati.com. She asks, what are the chances you'll be able to keep Ja'Marr Chase and Tee Higgins together? He says, it's going to be hard. We feel like we have the resources to do it, but it all depends on how the negotiation goes and whether they're willing to accept wanting to come back at a number that makes sense for everybody. And you know what we do with T going forward. I've always been very upfront in my desire to have Tee Higgins on our team. I've never not been upfront about that, and that desire continues, but we have to be able to come together with his representation on what that means and what the right number is for his experience, for his play time, for his production. And let's find something that works for everybody, because he is a guy that we want to have here, and hopefully that can come together. But we have other guys who are trying to take big bites of the apple in other areas, and we're going to have to balance those as we go forward. So I think that comment there makes me think that the Bengals want to keep Tee Higgins around as long as he takes a team-friendly deal. And if you're Tee Higgins, you're about to get your first big contract in the NFL besides his, cheaper rookie contract. And if I'm Tee Higgins, I would fully understand if he wanted to go to free agency and make a lot more money and potentially even be the number one guy on another team. Because if he stays in Cincinnati, he's going to have to take, I think, a team-friendly deal, and he's not going to be the number one guy. Ja'Marr Chase is obviously the number one guy. And so it sounds to me like the Bengals want to keep him, but it sounds like they are very much willing to move on if Tee Higgins and his side don't want to come down to what number they want. And that's really the question. What are the Bengals okay with paying Tee Higgins on a per-year basis, and is Tee Higgins willing to take that number? I saw a number recently from PFF. They predicted a 4-year deal at $28 million per year, and I think that's reasonable for Tee Higgins. But considering there's not that many other top-tier wide receiver free agent options, if he were to go the free agency route, I think teams will be willing to pay over $30 million. There's already 6 receivers in the NFL making over $30 million. And just supply and demand, if there's not a lot of guys out there for people to sign as free agents, then I just think that's going to up his price. And I just don't know if Tee Higgins is really willing to take that pay cut. If he is, awesome for him and awesome for the Bengals, but it's a pretty complicated situation. And here's another quote from Tobin. He said, "It's all about finding a contract that works for both sides. And if we're really engaged with his representation at doing that, I think we can get it done. But if there's no engagement to get something done that makes sense, then it's going to be very difficult, and we'll have to see what other avenues we have." So it sounds like Tobin is being very open to the fact that if they aren't able to find a number that works for them, they're very willing to move on. Maybe it's just negotiating tactics to try to get Tee Higgins down a little bit. Maybe they are fully sold on bringing him back, but I honestly wouldn't be too sure. And I think that the question that you're having to ask if you're the Bengals, is the cost worth it for Tee Higgins? Because you already have one of, if not the best receivers in football in Ja'Marr Chase, and you're going to have to pay him, I would assume, more money than Justin Jefferson, who is currently at $35 million per year. And just from a team building perspective, is it really wise to pay, 2 receivers and potentially as the, top 10 guys on a per year basis? Honestly, I don't think that's the best way to build your organization and build your franchise. And we see so many other teams with quarterbacks that are making so much money having to move on from some of their top tier receivers just because of the money situation. We saw the Chiefs years ago trading away Tyreek Hill, which at the time was pretty shocking. And the Chiefs have been able to find success, and their highest paid receiver currently is DeAndre Hopkins at $13 million per year. and then Marquise Brown at $7 million. Of course, the Chiefs do have Travis Kelce at around $17 million, so that does change it up there. And then the Bills were also willing to move on from Stephon Diggs, and the Bills' highest paid receiver is Amari Cooper at $20 million. Before he was there was Curtis Samuel at $8 million. And so it's not that you can't pay Tee Higgins. I think, as Tobin said, it sounds like they have the resources. They're 10th in cap space in the NFL, currently at around $46 million available per over the cap. So they could easily pay Tee Higgins, but of course, then that's money you can't use on the offensive line. That's money you can't use on the defense. That was one of the worst in the league, 25th ranked scoring defense in 2024. And so, personally, I think the Bengals should 100% move on from Tee Higgins. I think that you pay Joe Burrow the kind of money you pay him because he's going to elevate the guys around him. It makes much more sense, in my opinion, for the Bengals to go out and draft a receiver and be able to have him on a cheap rookie contract for years and years, as opposed to having to pay two guys in the top 10 in per year basis in the wide receiver room. And I think that if you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, that's one team that I see people have brought up when it comes to them paying two guys pretty high money in the receiver room, and that is true. When we look at those two contracts, A.J. Brown's making $32 million per year, which is the third highest receiver per year amount. And then you have Devontae Smith at $25 million per year, which is the 11th highest paid receiver, and it has worked out for them. Here's the massive difference between the two situations with the Bengals and the Eagles. You have to look at the cap hits of Jalen Hurts versus Joe Burrow. Jalen Hurts just got his new contract before the year. Burrow's was a couple of years back, a year or two or so ago. And when we look at Jalen Hurts, his cap hit this year with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith already with their contracts this year, his cap hit was $13.5 million per year this year, $13.5 million. Joe Burrow's cap hit in 2025 is going to be $46 million. And so the Eagles were able to have those two contracts in the books in 2024 at pretty cheap amounts, where Joe Burrow's cap hit compared to Jalen Hurts this past year, that's a difference of $33 million. So I don't think that these two situations are very similar. If we look at Hurts' cap hit next year, $21.7 million. Joe Burrow's cap hit in 2026, $48 million. Jalen Hurts' cap hit in 2026, $31 million. And so considering the Bengals are an organization that doesn't typically like to restructure contracts, if Burrow plays on a $46 million cap hit, there's no way that you should be paying Jamar Chase that kind of money and Tee Higgins that kind of money. So I think that the Bengals, the best idea for them is to not pay Tee Higgins, let him go out, make money elsewhere, draft a receiver somewhere in the first few rounds, use that money you would have spent on Tee Higgins to bolster your offensive line, which is one of the worst in the league, 32nd pass block win rate, protect Joe Burrow, get a rookie receiver, and then also you can use that money on a defense that just has struggled this past season. So that's sort of my thoughts on the situation. We'll see what happens here. If you want more NFL content, I put out multiple NFL videos a week, so feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.